have to take some questions. I assume that's scheduled. Here we are.
Joe, thank you very much. Can you tell us what you would do with the Department of Education and specifically Common Core?
If it were up to me, that would be the second thing I would get rid of. However, that's not up to the president, so the best I can do is to get Congress to defund it. I will act much differently than Ronald Reagan. You know, one myth I'd like to get rid of is that Ronald Reagan gave us smaller government. He actually gave us bigger government every year for 8 years, year after year after year. He increased spending. And people closest to him said, well, what do you expect? You know, the Congress never gave him a balanced budget, and they never gave him a smaller budget. Well, if they gave, well, let me add, he would sign it happily anyway. I would refuse to sign any budget that wasn't balanced and that wasn't smaller and that didn't decrease dramatically the size of the Department of Education until we can get rid of it altogether. Education is a local issue. It should be decided among parents, teachers, and students of each locality. And I think it's egregious that Donald Trump is out there telling schools to open, because different schools have different needs and people should make their own decisions. Thank you. I hope that was the answer you were looking for.
And a little bit more on Common Core would be nice.
Oh, Common Core. Isn't Common Core with the Department of Education? Yeah, if they're gone, then Common Core is gone. Yep, local. It should be, you know, the needs of rural Appalachia, much different than the needs of downtown New York City, much different than the needs of Madison, Wisconsin. There should be absolutely no one-size-fits-all federal government system for education or for anything else for that matter. Now have I answered your question? I'm a teacher. I can tell when I haven't quite answered the question fully.
I have a question.
Oh, well, actually, we've got somebody with a microphone, but I think you can be about third in line.
So I'm actually an immigrant myself, along with my family. So I've lived in both Singapore and Indiana within my lifetime. So we know exactly the truths in what you're saying about their healthcare system. My question is, if you were president during this COVID-19 pandemic, what would be your plan to incentivize vaccinations and drugs while maintaining an exemplary scientific standard?
Well, I guess I almost don't understand the question. Because the pharmaceutical companies, they've already shown that they love making gobs and gobs of money. So I would say the incentive is there because they've got, you know, 340 whatever, however many million people out there who are potential customers. And the pharmaceutical industry has shown in the past that they're very good at coming up with drugs and vaccines and attaching prices to them. And in fact, I've seen an increase in the number of vaccine ads just on TV. So that's the nice thing about the free market, is the free market can, you know, I hate to be so, you know, philosophical, but Adam Smith and the invisible hand, the free market will take care of that. Anytime the government gets involved and they start handing out their own goodies, usually it's their friends and their special interests and people who gave them campaign donations who get all of those goodies. And instead, I want the drug companies to, for once, have to work for our money and to please us and not please the people in Washington. Thanks.
Dr. Jorgensen, I'm a high school civics teacher from Beloit, and I'm wondering if you can address my students here who are voting for the very first time this November.
Well, let me say that I was so fortunate to find out about the Libertarian Party when I was in college, so the very first time I ever voted was for a Libertarian candidate. And I would just like to point out that the Libertarian Party is the only party that's on your side and not the side of special interests and lobbyists in Washington. And wouldn't it be great if you could vote every day how to live your life instead of every year every 4 years placing one vote and then having to live under those laws for one day? And just to give you an example, masks, because many young people don't really even need to be wearing masks. Rather than having a bureaucrat in Washington or in the State House telling us we have to wear masks, how about, wouldn't it be nice if every day you woke up and you got to decide, you know what, today I'm going to vote to wear a mask. I'm going to go shop at Walmart. Or to wake up and say, you know what, today I'm going to vote to not wear a mask. I'm going to go shop at Walmart's competitor that doesn't have a mask. So I would suggest it's a much better system to vote with your feet or vote with your dollars than to vote for a one-size-fits-all, whether it's at the state house or the federal government. Thanks. Hey.
Sorry for trying to cut the line before I didn't realize there was one. So my question is, I understand you have since amended the list, but that when you first put out your list of potential nominees for the Supreme Court, that you included somebody who has defended a pedophile, and I'm wanting to understand both how that name was even ever included in the first place and whether you would consider somebody defending pedophilia as disqualifying for being nominated for the Supreme Court.
You know, here's where I disagree with people in that, and by the way, I have no problem with him defending a pedophile because we need to keep the country from becoming a police state. We need to keep the police honest. We need to keep the prosecutors honest. We need to keep the judges honest. So I don't care the lowest of the low, which I would probably put, if pedophiles aren't the lowest of the low, I don't know who would be. But we need to have somebody defend them to keep the system honest, to make sure that the prosecutors follow the Constitution and that the politicians do follow the law with Miranda rights. So I have absolutely no problem with him defending anybody because I look at it as helping the system in general. And by the way, I partially got that from an LA Law episode in the 1980s because I've always actually been pretty pro prosecution side, but I thought, yeah, you know what? We really need the other side vigorously defended so that we don't turn into a police state. I'm not sure, and let me mention, I'm not sure who on my campaign put the name on that list. What I think disqualifies him is as far as pedophilia, is that apparently his name was on the roster and that hasn't been, decided. Absolutely, Bill Clinton, anybody on the Lolita Express, no excuse whatsoever. So there's a difference between defending somebody in our court to keep the system honest versus you committing a crime yourself. But secondly, the reason that his name jumped out at me, and I'm probably going to get myself in trouble for saying it all over again, and libertarians hate to hear this, I'm going to say it anyway. He sat there and called himself a proud Hillary supporter while he said that Donald Trump should not be impeached because that's not the way the country works. Our country doesn't work with you start a person, look for a crime. The way our country works is you start with a crime and look for the perpetrator. And I thought, wow, you don't hear that kind of bipartisanship, that kind of impartiality, and that's what a judge needs. And every time somebody gets nominated to the Supreme Court, it's, oh, this is a judge on the right, this is a judge on the left. He's the only person I've heard of in the entire country who said nice things both about Hillary and Trump. And I thought, okay, this is a rare person. This is the kind of impartiality we need. So that's what I was looking at. But absolutely, if there's any question about that, and the Second Amendment, again, he wants to change it constitutionally. I don't. So that alone disqualifies him. But thank you for that question. I appreciate it.
Dr. Joe, one of the biggest frustrations for the Libertarian faithful is that we are being ignored by the duopoly.
Yep.
We're getting pushed out of the debates. I know that the Libertarian Party has taken it to court and we got squashed there as well. It's a problem that I don't think the free market can help us with.
No.
I heard that the Boogie Boys were talking about maybe taking you up on stage, and I was wondering if you were contemplating accepting that offer, and if so, can I come?
On what stage?
The debate stage.
The debate stage.
Oh, yeah, no, it's still private property. It's wrong, it's unjust, but it's still private property, so I will respect that. However, we are trying to come up with our own debates and our own arena in which we can get the word out there. But let me just mention, I've been trying to tell people #fake debates because, you know, we hear the media say two old rich white guys, and that's not the worst of it. The worst of it is both of them want to spend our money. Both of them want to make decisions for us. Neither one's doing anything about the crushing healthcare costs, and neither one wants to bring the troops home. And by limiting it to just those two people, they say they're helping the American people because it'd be too crowded with anybody else, despite the fact that they had 9 people, you know, in the primary. No, they're just doing it for themselves. They're not doing it for the American people. And by the way, if it were up to me, I would have 4 of us on stage. Anybody who could theoretically get enough electoral votes to win the presidency, I think should be on stage. So we're still going to try to make a ruckus, and I'm not even sure what we have planned for the night of the debates, but all I know is I'm supposed to be teaching class that night, and I'm not teaching class because I'm going to be somewhere doing something. So thank you.
Given your stance on defunding the Federal Reserve or abolishing it completely, what would you say your stance on state banking would be?
State banking, as a federal government, I don't think we should get involved, because anytime you ask the federal government to get involved, then you just bring in more problems. And, you know, just look at Elizabeth Dole at the Highway Department. People said, oh, wouldn't it be great to have the federal government help us with highway funds? So they send the money to the federal government, and then the federal government says, Elizabeth Dole says, well, you can have your money back only if you raise your drinking age, which, by the way, maybe 21 is a better drinking age, but it shouldn't be the federal government doing that. Education, people say, let's get the federal government involved in education, and then look what happens. We have Common Core. So I would say that I would leave that up to the states, and at least there can be movement within the states, as we've seen from the people of California leaving in droves. So I just think anytime you ask the federal government to get involved, you're going to make things worse.
I didn't mean it like that, but you answered my question anyway.
I like your shirt, by the way.
Thank you. Not everybody's recognized it.
I've seen them in concert like 5 times.
Hi, could you please tell me your position on global warming and the environment?
I don't get into a debate on how much the earth is warming, whether it's warming through man-made cause or not man-made cause, whatever. But as far as where we are now, what's the best thing to do where we are right now? And I say by far the best way to take care of the earth is with private business and not the federal government. And first of all, if you just get out a globe and look, wherever there's bigger government, there tends to be more pollution. Wherever there's less government, there's less pollution. And I can give you two examples here. One is the Gulf oil spill. And a lot of people said, look, you know, it was a corporation. This is why we need the government involved, because corporations don't care about the environment. Actually, the government had given them a liability cap so that when they had the spill, you know, they didn't go bankrupt. They didn't go out of business. They didn't have to basically pay for their mess. In a private market, what would have happened is they would have had to have gone to an insurance company, and the insurance company would either said, nope, too risky, we're not going to insure you, you can't do it, in which case they could have done it, but they would have at least gone bankrupt. Or the insurance company would have said, okay, but it's kind of risky, we'll insure you, but we're going to come out every week or every month to make sure it's going okay because we don't want to pay a claim. So there's a profit motive to keep that from happening. But what happened instead was the federal government said, don't worry about it, and then the taxpayers paid the bill. You know, it's no skin off of the government. What do they care? What matters is people who own the land. And I would suggest that timber companies certainly wouldn't let these fires happen the way the federal government has, because their profits would literally be going up in smoke. And last, I met with 2 wonderful women who are part of a group called PERC, P-E-R-C. They're out of Bozeman, Montana. And they told me this, you've heard of them? They told me this local case where the beautiful wooded area and the community and the timber company, you know, wanted to sell it and cut down the trees. And the local people were like, no, they're beautiful trees, we want it. And so they actually put a bid in, and they beat the timber company's price. And so then they were like, uh-oh, now what do? We won the bid. How are we going to raise enough money, to pay for this? And they raised the money within 2 weeks. So that just shows that there are people who are interested in conservation, people who are willing to put their money towards it. And by the way, the state government, after that happened, they changed it so now that can never happen again. So now the timber companies, the corporations will get their way. Because again, they're the ones making the campaign contributions. So I say that let the highest value get it, and oftentimes the highest value, well, usually the worst, the people who care about it the least are the people in government, because it's no skin off of their nose. So thanks.
Good evening, Joe. One of the hardest things when talking to right-leaning people, especially on social media and things like that, is they'll mention your support for Black Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. They don't kind of get the disconnect between the Marxist organization and the movement. Would you mind speaking on just maybe Marxism in general, and then if you have a moment, maybe even the Kyle Rittenhouse thing in Kenosha?
Yeah, well, first of all, this is probably the biggest typo in my campaign, because I've had to explain it so many times. It was never supposed to be capitalized Black Lives Matter as in the Marxist group, so that's the first problem. But I had met, it turns out this is a big umbrella corporate, organization, and not all people are aligned with the Marxist organization. Of course, libertarians are literally opposite to Marxist, and if you don't believe me, just look at a Nolan chart and you'll see we're up here, they're down here. But just to give you an example, I talked with a local Black Lives Matter leader in Oklahoma, who I spent all day with him, in fact. Well, not all, like most of the day. And we talked, and it turns out that we agree on so many problems: the racist war on drugs, no-knock laws, qualified immunity. And by the way, he was a black preacher who had been in prison, so now he was a felon, and of course he had his gun rights taken away. And I said, you know what, here's libertarian thinking on this, is that if you're so dangerous that you can't be trusted with a gun, you should be in jail. Once you've done your time, you shouldn't lose your right to self-defense. And he was glad to hear that finally. And I also asked him, I said, by the way, the story of, Rosa Parks refused to sit down on the back of the bus. Did you know that was a government-run, government-owned bus? And he said, no, I didn't. And I said, did you also know that about 60% of the ridership at the time were blacks? Now imagine today if somebody like Uber discriminated against their best 60% of their customers. They would go out of business as well they should. And he said, wow, you're right. And he actually accompanied me to the state convention that evening. And he said, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. So here's the problem, is that we see very similar problems. We do see institutionalized racism. We do see no-knock raids as a problem. We do see the war on drugs as a problem. They think the answer is bigger government, at least the Marxist group. We know that the problem is already big government. We need smaller government. So if I can talk to local groups like that and just, get a little wedge in there, get them thinking. And by the way, he did say that no, he was not affiliated with the Marxist group, and he said he wasn't really strong politically one way or the other, but he was really interested in what we had to say. So, and I would say that I think that the government, the federal government, being where it shouldn't be in local policing, handing out tanks and tear gas and so forth, has militarized the local police to kind of set the stage. And not to get all professory or anything, but there's something called the weapons effect, that if you have a weapon, you're more likely to use it. Basically, instead of police having the, like on the sides of the cop cars, community, protect and serve and all that, now because the federal government has been arming them to be like soldiers, now they've got an us versus them mentality, and I think that it's probably escalated faster because of federal government involvement and that the federal government hadn't been involved, we'd be better off. I know that was probably a long answer, but that's really important, and especially there's so much misunderstanding. But no, I am not, nor have I ever been a Marxist. I read Animal Farm in about 5th grade, and that's all it took. Thanks.
So I'm sure we're all aware of your views on the NFA, but what are your views on import-export law and especially ITAR regulations?
On what? I'm sorry.
Import-export law and especially ITAR, which cripples the firearms industry.
Import-export laws?
Yep.
Yeah, free trade is free trade. And I hate the term fair trade because the question is fair to whom, you know? If we want to import or export, if there are two people willing to trade, then there's no moral reason for anybody to get involved. And also, I would suggest that economic-wise, that just helps economics, and that, you know, if without tariffs, people would be able to buy goods at better prices, and we would be much better off. Did that answer your question? I probably didn't hear it quite because of the mask, but.
So specifically with restricted items like firearms and stuff like that that are restricted from import and export.
Okay, firearms. I don't believe that our government should be selling arms to other countries. I think, again, one giant Switzerland, armed and neutral. However, individuals, I would get rid of every gun law in the past 100 years, that we do have the Second Amendment, and I would do everything to keep the egregious red flag laws from being instituted, because they take away our constitutional right without even a fair trial.
Hi. So, I'd like to ask, how do you plan to deal with the Chinese Communist Party and also the way that American corporations are able to exploit people and infringe on their civil rights in China and then export those products that they use child labor to produce to America and sell them for cheap prices?
Okay, and you're my last question. Nobody can even volunteer to ask me a happy question after that. First of all, we cannot ever get into a war with China. We have the ability to obliterate each other. Before Donald Trump took office, China was showing no signs of wanting to take over other countries. In fact, we were the ones who added 2 more countries to the UN. And so I would suggest that having a tariff war, which, notice the word war, that's just going to make enemies out of them, and that's not a good thing. And I would say that, and now China is starting to kind of rear its head. In fact, somebody on my campaign team came up with, I'll try it out on you guys, you can tell me what you think. Are you familiar about how we would talk about the Soviet Union, about poking the bear, about you don't want to poke the bear? He said that what Trump is doing is poking the panda bear with China. Not so much? Okay. We thought it was clever. So all he's doing with this tariff war is just creating enemies out of them. And the way we got into World War II is Japan bombed us. Part of the reason that historians say that they bombed us is because of tariff wars. But they're not going to bomb us now because of all the Toyotas and Hondas we buy from them, because you tend to not bomb your best customer. And so I would suggest that we need to be friends with China, be good trading partners just like we are with Japan, so that we don't get into a real war. Okay, well, thank you for having me. I'm not sure who I relinquished the stage to.
Isn't Mama Jo incredible? Give her a round of applause. You guys showed up. Yes, Madison. Wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you.